Globally, debt has become a burden which will in fact collapse nations. So today we will discuss how the bankers are now warning that the world is drowning in unpayable debt. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. I want to get into the debt today and discuss exactly why this is a very serious issue. Let's begin with Greece. Obviously, this is one nation that has suffered, particularly since the financial crisis, in this level of austerity never seen before. This is a project that they are in fact engaging in, that is the IMF, and it is working very well to take everything that Greece has. Greece to miss IMF payments amid fears of catastrophic eurozone rupture. This article out of the Telegraph suggests that a Greek reversion to the drachma would be an irreversible disaster for the entire euro project. There are 2 points that I want to mention right here. Number one is the fact that they do not necessarily need to return to the drachma. They could use an other currency, some alternate currency, perhaps the US dollar, perhaps the British pound, perhaps something else altogether. I will also note the fact that, yes, in the short term, there will be much turmoil within the EU and Europe in general, and that would probably be bullish for the US and the US dollar. But in the long term or longer term, we could suggest perhaps that it would seem even stronger for the euro, that they're willing to let the weak nations leave. To me, that seems like a much better idea. So something to sit on. Let's look at this further into the article, where we are seeing Greece will be unable to find the 1.6 billion euro sum it's due to hand the IMF next month, according to one of the country's ministers. The Greek state is due to hand over the money in 4 installments as part of its obligations for its 2011 bailout. This is what I predicted in my book, that they would receive not only one bailout, but a second bailout and more, and suggested that they will be unable, not just Greece, but the other nations, will be unable to pay back their loans that they have been given. Why? It's not a crystal ball. This is not a soothsayer. This is just reality. They set up the terms intentionally in order to never be paid back, and to make it impossible for them to pay back. Why? Because they want the assets of that nation. They're doing so very successfully in Greece at the moment. I've covered this many times before. I want to move on to this and shift gears for a moment to look at Amazon, but this is just one example of many. Internet retailer Amazon.com's main German operating unit paid just 11.9 million euros in tax in 2014, despite the fact that they made 11.9 billion in sales to German customers last year. Think about that. They pay 11 million in tax and they have 11 billion in sales. What does that tell you about the elite? That they're able to pay whatever they want and they can get away with it. Yes, they use their loopholes. They're able to park that money overseas in these different nations like Luxembourg and so on, where they're able to have this tax sheltering schemes and never have to pay a dime on it if they don't want to. This is what we have seen historically with GE. We have seen other instances of this, and there is no doubt in my mind that these nations are able to basically use their power, use all of their real collective agreements here, their collusion with the government, in order to not pay taxes and continue on with their corporate profits. In my book, I talked about how we are being taxed into poverty. Governments of the West are implementing regulations and taxes that are destroying businesses' ability to operate. This applies mostly to the small businesses, but even the big businesses are able to take this and essentially use it to actually increase their profits. Let me explain that in a moment. GE is moving its X-ray unit to China in order to increase their profits. 3M does its manufacturing in China and wants to expand it further. China's labor costs are so low, it often makes more sense to make the products there and export them rather than produce the same goods in Europe or the US for local consumption. Think about that for a second, where they want to purchase a particular item in the US, but instead of having their manufacturing here, having their sales here, having everything being done locally, where it would be basically traveling down the street in a truck, you have everything shipped overseas, all of what they need, all their ingenuity, in fact, bring it into China, open up shop there, charge what they need to, which is pennies on the dollar for the labor, and then you are able to ship it over halfway across the world, right back into these people's hands, the American hands, and that is in fact the way that they do business. It is very, very successful for them. So that's all I wanted to touch on for my book here, and also wanted to note this because we're on the topic of China. This is out of the AP. China readies national carbon market to fight climate change. We have seen what this whole cap and trade carbon emission schemes have done, and that is in fact to create corporate profits for those involved. A successful carbon offset or cap and trade market could play a big part in cutting China's emissions and would help the world tackle global warming. All this does is take the factories that are polluting, because of course if they're polluting, or so they say polluting, they will in fact just have to pay money. They don't have to close up shop, they just have to pay money. So what do? They open up shop in a different country that doesn't have this system, whether or not that's China or Vietnam or Taiwan or Brazil or what have you. They don't have to abide by the same rules, or they will pay less and they will just continue to pollute. All you do is take the manufacturing base away from the Western nations and move it in to these other nations. But guess what? The cap and trade systems, all of these carbon emission markets that have opened up, some of them aren't doing very well, as the one in this article, but they are able to profit from all of this system that is going on, and that's what this all comes down to. Getting into the big article here, where we are looking at the debt problem. HSBC fears the world recession with no lifeboats left. This is a very, very serious situation. They're looking at the business cycles becoming stretched, the inventories built up, and the companies defer spending, tipping over at a certain point into self-feeding downturns. This is what happened in the financial crisis. We saw that ourselves. But now Stephen King from the HSBC is warning that the global authorities have alarmingly few tools to combat the next crunch, given that the interest rates are already zero across most of the developed world. Debt levels are at near or record highs, and there's little scope for fiscal stimulus. This is what I've been talking about now for years, suggesting to you that when they're at 0% interest rate, when the interest rates are actually moving negative territory in certain cases, you have the laws and regulations basically being stretched to the point where the individual citizen, the middle class, is basically being destroyed, and the elite are making more profits than ever. We have this wealth inequality that has never been worse in history. They don't have anywhere to go. The world economy is sailing across the ocean without any lifeboats to use in case of emergency. But I would suggest even further that this boat has already begun to sink. And that is the truth. Let's look at this further into another article out of the Telegraph. The world is drowning in debt, warns Goldman Sachs. Aging populations mean countries' debt piles risk growing out of control, warns the European head of Goldman Sachs Asset Management. This is a very good article, in fact, because you can put your mouse over the different nations to see their debt. But you can see graphically here, the darker red is in fact the nations with the highest amount of debt. Europe being very high. You have Japan, you have the US and Canada and Brazil and other nations that are in high levels of debt that will in fact never be paid back. When you include all of the unfunded liabilities, it is an absolute joke. Let's look further on into this article where we see that the world is sinking in under too much debt, and an aging population means The country's debt piles are in danger of growing out of control. There is no need to have any worry that the world is going to get any better anytime soon, because we have the debt that is continuously piling up. The whole system is built to get worse. So we don't have to worry about which direction it's heading. We know it's heading downward. There is too much debt, and this represents a risk to economies. Consequently, there is a need to generate growth to work that debt off. But as the demographics change, new ways of thinking at a policy level are required to do this. Once again, things that I've talked about very often. So I'm going to move on to this last article. And just to note one simple thing: working to death in Japan. Health warning over no overtime law. This is out of the AFP, I believe. And what we are seeing here is that the people have certain things in their lives. Perhaps they say, look, we have advanced medical care at this time. We have these pharmaceutical drugs that are saving people's life, and these surgeries that are saving people's life. And we have our iPhones. We are interconnected, where we can connect all across the world through FaceTime and Skype and everything. We have satellites orbiting the Earth, taking pictures of everything. And we have all of these advancements that are supposedly helping us, but the most basic needs for our lives are in fact not the same as they once were. And this is just one very good example of that. These individuals here working their 9-to-5 jobs, going well beyond that in fact, and they're working themselves literally to death in this system that has been built intentionally in a way that it basically profits the corporations. They can continue their corporate profits, get them to expand and expand, but the real citizens who are working at those corporations are suffering with their own lives. That's all I wanted to get to in this video. If you found it informative, please give me a thumbs up. I appreciate that very much. Much more to come here at the Money GPS. I have so much to get into, but just simply not enough time. But I'm really slowly but surely, when days that you don't see videos, those are the days I'm working on things behind the scenes. So trust me, there is much more to come. And just a little tidbit here: I am planning on doing the live Q&A. I assure you I will let you know, try to give you as much notice as possible. I'm in the Eastern time zone in Toronto, so just to let you know that it'll probably take place on a Friday evening, perhaps at like 8 or 9 p.m. in the Eastern time zone. But when, I'm not sure, but I will certainly let you know with an advanced warning. And last but not least, if you found this video informative, I know that you will find my book even more informative. I mean, you can actually flip through that. If you go to Amazon.com, they have a look inside feature where you can flip through the book and see if you like it for yourself. Take care.